Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. You are watching Behind the Skies, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to start up the A320 in Microsoft Flight Simulator from a cold and dark state. As well, I will show you the takeoff, climb out, cruise, descent and arrival all in this video. So let's get started, enjoy. Then, hopping inside of the flight deck, you will notice everything is turned off. We are going to come over to the overhead panel then, and we are going to turn on the two main battery switches. Then we can turn on the external power if it is available. At that point you'll hear other systems come to life. You then can turn on the no smoking sign and nav and logo lights. Let's come down to the FMC then, and we can start plugging in some stuff over here. First of all, we're going to go to the Init tab, and as you can see we're going from Dublin to Manchester. We're going to pop in our cruise altitude, which for me today is flight level 230, and we can just plug that in. And you are also going to plug in your cost index, which for me today is 8. I recommend using SimBrief to generate awesome flight plans which are quite similar to the real world. Of course, don't use them in the real world. Use the resources which you have available if you are flying in the real world. Cool. Now we have that done, that's pretty much it for that tab. We're going to go over to the flight plan tab now, and we're going to go to EIDW and the departure. We're then going to select the runway which we will be departing from, which for me is 28 left. If you have a departure, you're going to pop that here, and mine is the Liffey 7 Alpha departure. So I'm going to select that and click insert. That's going to automatically import some waypoints, and then you can plug in any other waypoints you might have. First of all, I'm going over to WOW, so I'm going to type that in, and I'm going to select the Liffey, and it should pop the WOW underneath it. You'll notice here there are two different places called WOW. Often the one at the top is closer to you, and it's a VOR, so that is my one. Cool, and as you notice that pops it in. Then I'm going over to Mercy, so I'm going to plug this in. Fantastic, and then I'm going to select that onto WOW, and then if I scroll down it's going to insert that right underneath it. And that's basically my whole flight plan. So now I'm going to go over to EGCC, to the arrival tab, and I'm arriving on the ILS 05 right. I don't have any stars, but if you did have one you could pop that in here and select it. So I'm just going to click insert. And that is your flight plan all filed. For the time being you can leave the V speeds, but I may make another tutorial if you are more advanced, but this tutorial is meant for beginners. Now you have that all ready, we can come back to the overhead panel. At this point in the real world you could turn on the fasten seatbelt signs, and you are going to want to click the APU master switch, wait 3 seconds, and then click the APU start. Now if you're a beginner I recommend using the in-game ATC. So I'm going to call for clearance, and I'm going to show you what you are going to do. So what they said there was to take off on runway 28 left, which I knew, so I plugged that into the flight plan, and then they want us to climb to 10,000 feet. So we're going to come over to the MCP, and we're going to change this from 5,000 to 10,000, whatever altitude they give you. And then if they give you a squawk code, you're going to come over down to this panel here, and you're going to pop in your squawk code, which for me is 2667, which I've already done. Fabulous. Now, by this point the APU hopefully has started, and you'll know that because there'll be a green available light. Now you can turn on the APU bleed and disconnect the external power. You'll hear a few things go on in the background, but that is totally normal. Now we are going to call for pushback. So we can release the parking brake, which is right down here, and if we come over to the overhead panel once again, we're going to want to turn on all of the fuel pumps. You want all of them on because we will be starting up the engines shortly. If you look outside you see there's the pushback tug coming along, and we're just going to push back all the way. So once I finish pushback I'll get right back to you. Okay, I have just completed pushback, so now we can start up the engines. We're going to come over down here and we are going to move the engine mode selector to the ignition/start position. Then you're going to click on engine master 2 until it goes to the on position. If you look over here, you will notice that the N2 percentage will rise, and then eventually the N1 percentage will rise as well. So you're just going to wait for that to get to around 19%, and when it does, come back to this video. Okay, now it is at 19.5. We can do the same thing for engine number 1. You may hear like a dog barking kind of sound coming from the engines. Don't worry, that's completely normal. So engine master 1 to the on position, which is perfect, and then wait until that gets to around 19%. Okay, that engine has also started up successfully, so we're going to bring the engine mode selector back to the normal position, and we're going to select flaps 1 for departure. Once the flaps have come out, you're going to request taxi. Okay, so I can accept the taxi clearance. And now we can release the parking brake and commence our taxi. So I'm going to taxi out to the runway, and then I'll get right back to you guys. Okay, so now I have my taxi clearance. I'm going to come back to the overhead panel real quick, and we can turn off the APU. You only need to turn off the APU master, and the APU start will automatically turn off. You're going to bring your taxi lights to the takeoff position, landing lights both on, and strobe lights on, as well as your wing lights. Before you depart, you're going to want to turn on your flight directors, and now we are about ready. So what we are going to do is we're going to release the parking brake, we are going to bring up our throttles and push them all the way forward. Then when we get to our V speeds, which will be indicated by the pink line, once you get to those speeds, you can gently lift up the nose. So I'm going to take off now and walk you through it. So I'm going to release the parking brake and I'm going to push the throttles all the way forward. The engines will spool up and you'll see the speed is increasing. Often when you get around to 140 knots, that is about the time when you bring the nose up. So I'm going to gently pull up on the nose, and now we are airborne. Congratulations, you have successfully gotten yourself into the air. We're then going to pop the gear up and then bring our flaps up when we get close to the barber poles. Now when you feel ready, you can turn on the autopilot. At this point you can bring your throttles back to the climb detent, and as you'll notice I've been handed over to departure, so I'm going to go over and contact them. So now we can request our cruise flight level, which as I said earlier for me is flight level 230. Okay, I've requested an altitude a bit too high, so I'm going to request the altitude I need. And once you turn the autopilot on, the aircraft will fly itself for you and do all the turns. Now once you have requested your cruising flight level, you can basically sit back and relax. Talking to ATC, they'll guide you all the way up to your cruising altitude, then come back to this video once you get to your cruise. Okay, now I am at my cruising altitude, we can prepare for our arrival. What we're going to do is come down to the MCDU and we're going to go to the Perf tab. We're then going to go to the next phase after the cruise descent until we find the approach. We are then going to pull up a METAR for our chosen airport. I recommend using a website called metartaf.com. I'll put a link in the description down below for you to find it yourself as well. So we're going to put the METAR into the box for Manchester, and we're going to put in the QNH, which is 1007. If there's anything inside already, you can just edit it. The temperature is 18 degrees, and we can put that in. And the winds is at 2 knots. So it's 000 at 2. Cool. And then we can put in our decision height. You can really choose whichever decision height you want. If you want to fly properly, then if you go onto like Navigraph charts, it'll have a decision height, but often I just pick 250 just for the sake of it. And that is all we need to set up, so now we can just wait out until we have to descend down to our next given altitude by ATC. So once you are once you have been told to descend, come back to this video. Okay, I've been told to descend, so we're going to acknowledge that. And then if we come over here, we can scroll it down until it says 17,000, and then we can click it in. And you should start to notice that the pitch down here starts to decrease. That's the flat line there, so that means you're leveled off. That's down, that's up. You get the gist. So now you are descending, you're going to go down to 17,000 feet or whatever the controller gives you, and then you are able to carry on going down to roughly 3,000 feet. Okay, I've been told now to descend down to 11,000 feet, so you're going to keep descending until you get to around 3,000 feet is often what a controller would descend you down to. The in-game ATC is perfect if you're just starting out, but as you get more experience, you could always move over to VATSIM if you are on PC. So you're going to keep on descending in line with whatever the controller tells you to, and we are descending. So come back to this video when you are at around 3,000 feet. Alright, I'm going down to 5,000 feet now. We can click that in, and we are continuing our descent down to 5,000 feet. And if you come over here, you are able to change the range, so you should be able to see the runway. So what I'm going to do is go all the way up, down, and then in. That is what the plan's going to be. So I'm going to continue descending, and I will catch you again once I've descended. Okay, at some point you'll get handed over to whatever airport approach controller, so you're just going to say hello to them, and they may give you a huge chunk of information. So I'm just going to wait until they give that to me, and then once they do, I'll tell you what you have to do. Okay, so now they have given me the information. They said my call sign, I am 21 miles northwest, for example, and I need to keep my speed below 210 knots. So you're going to come over here and use this wheel until you get to 200 knots, I would rather, and then you're going to click on it, and that should engage it. As you can see, the speed's going down, which is just what we want it to do. So now they want me down to 5,000, so I plugged that in, and we're continuing our approach now. And as you can see, we're going all the way around the airport and then back in. So I'm going to continue going around, and then I'll get right back to you guys. Okay, I'm shortly going to be turning on to final approach, as you can see by this loop indicated on the navigational display. So right before we take a turn, we're going to turn on a few different systems to guide us down to the runway and hopefully get a smooth landing. Okay, so I'm about to turn on to final, so we're going to come over to the MCP, and I'm doing an ILS approach, so I'm going to turn on the ILS system, which is here, and as you'll notice, in purple it says ILS runway 05 right, which is the runway I'm arriving on. Then you can click the approach mode on as well, and that will automatically descend the aircraft. When you're at 200 knots and about turning on to final like now, you can go and select flaps 1. Then with our speed indicator, we can bring it back down to 180 knots. And once we get to 180 knots, we'll go for flaps 2, and then 160, flaps 3, and then 150 to 140 will go flaps full, depending on your final landing speed. Alright, we're at 180, so we'll go for flaps 2, and we can dial in 160. Cool. As you'll notice, the aircraft is descending itself to get us on track with the runway. Okay, we can acknowledge our approach clearance, and you will soon start to notice you have these two diamonds appear. The bottom is how far off the runway you are, left and right. The top one over here is up and down. So you want them to be right in the middle of the gold bar, and once they are, that means you are in a perfect alignment for the runway. So we're going to contact Manchester Tower and try avoid turning off the autopilot like I just did. Okay, we have been cleared for our approach, and we're going to pop our gear down now as we're getting close to the runway, and that will also give us a bit more drag to hopefully get to 160 knots. If you need to slow down faster, you can always deploy a bit of speed brake to help you, and as you can see, I'm starting to get onto the gold bars. Alright, we'll go flaps 3, and we'll set our final approach speed, which today is 145 knots. and we can go flaps full. Perfect. I recommend disconnecting the autopilot at about 500 feet and then just hand flying it in until you get to the runway. So you'll see we've been on profile, the gears down, we can jump outside, the gears down, we have our flaps set to full, so we are pretty much ready to land the aircraft. Okay, we have our landing clearance and we can see the runway. There will be a set of 4 lights on either side of the runway, depending on what airport you're at. They are called the pappies. When there's 2 red, 2 white, it means you're on profile, which is good. If there's all white, that means you are too high. If there's all red, it means you're too low. And if you have 3 white and 1 red, that means you're a bit high. You get the idea. So we're going to wait to get to 500 feet. And when you hear the call out 30, you're going to bring the throttles all the way back to the idle detent. So we're descending still, looking good so far. You can follow the flight director when you disconnect the autopilot and that will help you out. Or you can just look outside of the aircraft as well. Alright, 500 feet, I'm going to disconnect the autopilot and let's land the aircraft. So when you hear 30 feet, you are going to bring the throttles all the way back to the idle position. Looking good. And as well, you're going to gently bring the nose up when you hear 30. You're going to bring the nose up a bit. Bring those throttles back, bring the nose up, and there we go. Bring the nose back down and you can deploy the reverse thrust. It doesn't have to be perfect if this is one of your first flights. I'm not the best at landing the aircraft, but once you get down, you get down, and that is how you do a flight in the Airbus A320. So, thank you all so much for coming along today. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, be sure to hit down that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.